Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Carl Fitzpatrick.
Southeast Radio.
Well, a trailblazing programme from TU Dublin, which aims to provide people with disabilities with an opportunity to enter the world of self-employment and entrepreneurship, is now operating successfully. Joining us now is the man behind the programme, Professor Tom Cooney. Tom, I've invited you onto this morning's programme to discuss the Self-Employment for People with Disabilities programme offered by TU Dublin. I'm very interested in hearing more about the course, but first, I'd like to learn about your own role within the university.
I am Professor of Entrepreneurship and I've been employed with TU Dublin. Previously was Dublin Institute of Technology for 30 years. The focus of my work has been entrepreneurship throughout that time. But in 2006, I established the Institute for Minority Entrepreneurship within what was then Dublin Institute of Technology and now TU Dublin. And we began to focus our work on marginalised and disadvantaged communities. So we've worked with immigrants, people with disability, traveller community, ex-offenders. I've delivered a program inside a prison, and seniors and other communities. And the argument has been across all of them about they each have additional and distinctive challenges that mainstream population do not experience, and that's what we're addressing.
And talk to us about those challenges.
It varies with different communities, and I think that's the part that's not understood. So if we go to enterprise support agencies generally and indeed policymakers, the argument that's made is that we treat everyone the same and our door is open to everyone. But treating everyone the same is actually not the answer. And the notion of our door being open to everyone only works if people know the door exists and they can access it. So the additional distinctive challenges will vary from community to community. And that's why each community needs a different approach. Now, what I would advocate is that the starting point is different, but once businesses are up and running, I think it's important to mainstream as quickly as possible because we don't want people to be ghettoized or businesses to be ghettoized. And also, entrepreneurs themselves they'd see themselves as entrepreneurs, not as an entrepreneur with a disability or not as an entrepreneur who's an ex-offender or whatever the background might be.
And Tom, how does your approach differ depending on the minority group that you're actually developing the entrepreneurship skills within?
So first of all, we'd have to undertake significant research to appreciate the distinctive challenges that particular community would face. So someone who has a disability would have very different challenges in terms of business startup than someone who's an immigrant, for example. So, for example, an immigrant might have issues around language. They'd have issues certainly around legal restrictions in terms of getting a business permit. They'd have issues around trust because unfortunately, racism, discrimination is an issue, whereas a person with a disability would have very different types of challenges, the biggest one being the welfare benefit trap and other distinctive challenges as well. So the first thing we do is the research. Second thing we do is we partner with organizations who already operate or support that particular community. So I'm not going to stand in front of any group of people and say, I feel your pain, when clearly I don't. I don't know what it's like to be someone with a disability or members of the other communities. An immigrant, yes, I did that for some time, but any of the others I don't. And then the third thing is we will identify role models from that community who have succeeded because role models are powerful. They show there's a pathway for people on the course to achieve their goals, their ambitions, because others have done it before them.
And of course, employment and entrepreneurship are very closely linked. And I do recall a number of months ago, the OECD released a report and it showed that Ireland was lagging behind in terms of employment figures when it came to those with disabilities. In fact, my recollection of it is that only 1 out of 3 people with disabilities in Ireland actually has a job.
That's quite correct, Carl. And we have the 4th lowest rate of employment in the European Union for people with disability. Add to that, the rate of pay is also lower than people without disability would be receiving for the same job. We also know that during the pandemic, that people with disability were disproportionately affected by unemployment in terms of being let off. A number of reasons for that would have included the nature of the job in which they were working in, the nature of the industry in which they were working in, but also the fact that, in some cases it was the easiest option for people, or what they consider to be the easiest option for people. And we also know from ESRI research from the Celtic Tiger era and the subsequent bust that people from these marginalised communities, and particularly people with disability, had greater difficulty in re-entering the labour market subsequent to being laid off. So the journey back is significantly longer. And unfortunately, Carol, self-employment is not considered as an option in terms of supporting people back into the labour market.
And Tom, apart from the welfare trap, what are the other barriers that are holding those with disabilities back from entrepreneurship?
Well, if we've just been talking about employment and the poor access to employment and the rates of employment. If you're not in a job, okay, then you're not getting relevant industry experience. Or if you're in a job but getting poorly paid, then you're not generating enough income from your position to allow you to retain capital to start the business. We've also got evidence to show that the cost of disability is significantly higher. Okay, there was a report last month from Indicon, okay, claiming that it's in the region of €15,000 extra a year for a person with a disability, okay, in terms of the cost that they have to sustain. So, there's less access to disposable income. They have less managerial experience. They have less industry experience. Also, you may have people who have mobility issues where, issues like networking would become a problem. However, what I would argue is that what COVID has shown us is that remote working, and we're working from home, is now much more viable. Assistive technologies have improved dramatically. So in fact, this is a time when I think self-employment for people becomes a greater option. And it also allows them the flexibility in terms of managing their time, their location, the nature of their job. And also, if they had issues like hospital appointments or needing to step back due to health concerns, there's much greater flexibility for them in terms of all of those concerns and issues.
And Tom, specifically in relation to TU Dublin's self-employment for people with disabilities course, talk to us about the format of the programme and how it actually works.
Well, the first thing was that there was suggestions by people that that there wouldn't be a demand for it. That why don't they just take the course that's on offer through the local enterprise offices, as an example, right? We got funding for 20 places from Pobble through the Open Doors initiative, and that funding we advertised for applicants, and we had we got 40 applicants for that 20 places. And then there was an application process, a review process, and 20 people were offered places. The nature of the course was it was 12 weeks online, which meant that a person from anywhere in the country was able to participate. There was a lecture for 2 hours online every Wednesday from 11 to 1. The first hour would be where I was dealing with content around specific topic of that day. The next half hour was an expert on that topic doing a kind of guest speaker role. And then the last half hour was a guest speaker who was an entrepreneur with a disability who was successful. So we had 12 different role models across the lectures who demonstrated what was possible. So the likes of Mark Pollock, Sinead Kane, all talking to the class about their entrepreneurial journey, the challenges they faced and the experiences they had. In addition to that, we identified an online tool from the UK called SimVenture Validate, which allows people to build their business plan on a week-by-week basis. It uses the business model Canvas template. And that we found really effective because it didn't overwhelm anyone at any one time. You just answered a series of questions and you worked your way through it on a week-by-week basis. We also secured a business mentor for each participant on the course, and they were supplied through the local enterprise office network, and that was funded by the Department of Enterprise. In addition to that, those mentors were trained by an organisation in the UK called Kaleidoscope Investments on working with people with disability in a mentoring capacity. In addition to that, we have a Dragon's Den style event taking place at the end of January, where it includes a venture capitalist, a bank person, someone from a local enterprise office, and someone from Microfinance Ireland, with the ambition being that if the business is viable, that between them, they might be able to advise on where funding could be secured to get the business up and running. So it's a very holistic package. One other thing is that all lectures were recorded, and so that meant that people were able to revisit the lecture at a time and space that suited them, because they may not have been able to follow the full flow of the class in the moment, but were able to revisit it at a later stage, or sometimes they might have missed it due to health reasons. So a really holistic approach, and what we were giving people was a supportive environment to determine the viability of their business idea.
And Tom, provide us with an insight into the profile of the course participants and what sectors they're looking at progressing into.
We were open to any form of disability. So the promotional materials said that we invite people who self-identify as having a disability. So the range of disability was very broad, and that created its own challenges for us as providers of the course, and ensuring that all the technology was appropriate for the different disabilities. So that was a learning experience for us, and a good learning experience, and one we benefited from. Then the nature of the business ideas are quite varied, but they're very strongly in the services sector. There are one or two outside the services, but generally it's services. A number of the applicants are targeting business ideas relating to people with disabilities. So it might be about identifying a gap in the market where disability support is currently not available, or where some type of product or service would be beneficial to people in the disability market. But the majority would be targeting communities outside the disability market, and would be kind of online activity was again quite popular, but quite broad, Carol, in the nature of the business ideas and the nature of the industries in which they were targeting.
And Tom, on a broader level, what more needs to be done to achieve a more inclusive and diverse entrepreneurship community here in Ireland?
Well, I think, first of all, I'm delighted we're having this discussion, because you're one of the very few people who has highlighted, the issues around employment and self-employment for people with disability. And I'm greatly surprised by the fact that we're not having more discussions about this. So one of the things I would hope will happen through your program and through other people talking is that the problem of employment and self-employment for people with disability becomes much more of a national discussion point. Secondly, I do believe that we should have an inclusive entrepreneurship policy out of the Department of Enterprise. We have an entrepreneurship policy that's now finished. We have the regional enterprise plans, but if you look at the regional enterprise plans, there's very little about inclusivity amongst them. Additionally, if you look at the comprehensive employment strategy for people with disability, 2015 to 2024, there's barely any mention in that document, and that's national policy, barely any mention in that document around self-employment. So the question I'm asking, Carol, is why are we not talking about this? Why do we not see the economic and social potential that exists for people from these marginalised communities towards employment and self-employment? And much greater discussion needs to be happening at a national level. And I'm delighted that you are addressing the issue.
Thank you, Tom. And finally this morning, in terms of our international counterparts, what country is leading the way in this area and what can we learn from them?
Interestingly is that when we look at what's happening internationally, it's a very similar story. And the programs that I examined internationally all had the problem of sustainability, that there were some really good programs, but on a 3 to 5 year basis, was as far as they ran, and then it stopped running. Now, what's interesting is that in Finland, what they're looking at is a different approach, which is that everything we do should be inclusive, and that we don't need specific tailored training programs, but instead we got to be looking at all policies, all initiatives. Are they truly inclusive? Are we really reaching out, in the way that includes everyone? But for the moment, what we're looking at is just examples of good practice in terms of effective courses in various countries in Europe, and there's no country that I would argue is a standout example that we could follow.
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was Professor Tom Cooney from TU Dublin, and I think this is an excellent initiative, and I look forward to hearing about its participant success in the years to come.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Carl Fitzpatrick.
South